Daniel Lacalle is with us, chief economist at Tressis Gestion. Today we're going to get a data dump from the United States. So we're going to have another look at the GDP number, expect it to be confirmed, I think, at the 1.9 level. The personal consumption data, 2.8% is what we're looking for. But the personal spending numbers for October will be interesting. We'll get those a little later on. Just how robust do you think the data points are going to be as we see them here? Because, I mean, obviously Mr. Kaplan is concerned about the economy into the fourth quarter, but we keep being told, you know, when you look at these Best Buy numbers and some of the other data, that the US consumer is still okay and they can keep this plane flying into 2020.
Yeah, well, the US consumer is still okay, but it's showing signals of weakness, and they're evident, I would say, everywhere. I think that the US data is likely to continue to be a mixed bag of better than expected, actually, in manufacturing. Manufacturing is what's actually surprising, probably more than services. And but it is showing the signals of a late cycle slowdown. Nothing bad about it, but you cannot expect
that 18 months ago, 24 months ago, 36 months ago.
No, I think that, in my opinion, 18 months ago, you had in the United States still a big push from the fiscal reform. You still had the expectations of a capex increase, of capital repatriation. All those things are behind you.
If that was true, why did we have a Fed pivot and a fourth quarter last year that was a disaster for those who were long the market?
Well, the Fed pivoted because of the
late cycle indications of slowdown.
Because of the fall in asset prices. That was it. Not because of the data. If you look at the actions of the Federal Reserve, none of them have anything to do with the data. Actions have been preemptive because of what other central banks were doing, and not because of the growth, unemployment, or inflation. Core inflation above 2%. What else do you expect? But the point is, the Fed reacted to asset prices, and asset prices were reacting to an extremely aggressive perception of normalization that actually never happened. But what the Fed is right now doing is simply reacting to what the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, and the PBOC are doing, which is to be more accommodative within a framework that is prudent. But I don't expect the data to change dramatically. Credit growth is not going to jump dramatically because of a rate cut. We are already seeing that is not happening. And capex growth is not going to happen when there is evidence of debt saturation and late cycle slowdown.
Dan, personal spending today, big ticket item, I think, for a lot of investors. But that said, we're coming up to Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Won't there be much more important, the anecdotal evidence very much front and centre about what people are doing in the shops, more so than what personal spending data look like?
Well, I think that the glass half full situation will be from a piece of data that will show a level of growth that is acceptable and that doesn't show significant cracks in the system, so that the level of spending is okay, and that credit card demand, etc., all of those factors are not too bad.
You can meet expectations on the personal spending today, but if you have a very weak Black Friday and Cyber Monday showing this year, investors are going to say, whoa, there's something wrong with Main Street. Or in fact just the opposite, that there's rude health for many consumers out there.
Are we in a situation again in which bad news is good news, because that means that central banks are going to be more dovish? Very probable, because the positioning of most investors, at least from what we gather from investment banks, etc., it is actually less towards the consumer side of the economy. However, I don't think that the data is going to be bad. I think that the data is likely to be decent, nothing to write home about. There will be some arguments for the bears, some arguments for the bulls, but like so many other pieces of data points in the United States macro so far, it is likely to say one thing, that is unlikely to see a recession anytime soon.